Welcome, everyone. This is the Human Animal Spiritual Network group. And today we're going to have a whole conversation about overwhelm and how we personally have dealt with overwhelm and just get some ideas from our own experience. So, does anyone want to start this conversation? I'm Barbara Shore, by the way, veterinarian and animal communicator. Who wants to go?
I'll start. Linda Bender, DVM, animal lover, veterinarian in the past, wildlife, and animal advocate. I spent many years working in the trenches, and overwhelm is something that really resonates with me. And I have experienced this so often in my work life and also in my personal life. And sometimes they even happen at the same time. Talk about a lot going on. But what I have learned over the years is the first and most important thing to remember, or for me to recognize when this happens, is that I actually am in a state of overwhelm and that this is not my normal. This is something that is outside of who I am as a person. And otherwise, if we don't recognize this, how can we possibly work through it and fix it? And I think step number one is this observation that we are out of equilibrium, that noticing what's happening to us. We are mental beings, we're physical beings, and we're emotional beings. It's what we're experiencing here in this life. And the first thing we notice is, wow, what's going on? And for me, what I've noticed over the years, I pay attention to my thoughts and my body, because my thoughts are what really initiates this whole conundrum. And I notice my body. What's happening to my body? Shallow breathing. My heart might be racing. I might be shaking a bit, feeling anxiety and confusion. I'll tell a quick story from, again, my own personal experience. When I was a little kid, I started to have test anxiety. It's when I first realized that something happens to you and you stop thinking and your body isn't right. And I would sit in front of a test and I couldn't think. And I've used that example throughout the years to help me. So the first thing to do is observe and then come up with ways that help to get us out of that state, how we respond. And I'd like to pass the baton and let other people carry on.
Well, in a concrete way, the first thing I do after observing, thank you, Linda. I'm Angela, and I am a DVM, and I've been in the trenches as well, and now have my own end of life business, which has helped my overwhelm tremendously. The I experienced overwhelm just yesterday out of nowhere. Anxiety brewed up, and I acknowledged it. The first thing that I always do in that state is I just go outside. It is pretty easy and I feel instantaneous. I went into the garden and I weeded and I felt 100% better. It works every time, but Linda really, really caught the first part. You have to know before you make action. So as soon as I realized it, I went outside bare feet and I felt so much better. So that's what I do when I'm overwhelmed.
Well, I'll speak next. What I've noticed for years is that I get really stressed out and anxious when I'm overwhelmed in some way. And I've also come to realize, it's taken many years to figure this one out, is that I push myself pretty hard. And I think our culture has this mentality that we need to be doing, we need to be producing, we need to be succeeding, and it's so much pressure. And I know when I was going through vet school and beyond working, it's always pressure. And I would put the most pressure on myself. And part of that pressure was feeling that I constantly had to prove myself in some way. And so what I'm starting to realize is how taxing that is for me mentally, physically, and emotionally. It can even lead to being really sick. And so what I'm starting to do is just stop and either go outside like Angela's talking about, or walk my dog, or watch a stupid, silly TV show and just laugh, or dance. Movement is really helpful. So these are the things, but the main thing for me that I'm learning still is just to slow it down and not put so much pressure on myself. The other thing is there's so much happening in the world right now. It can be overwhelming just to listen to the news. There's so much fear that the media sends out. So the other thing I do is just monitor myself, and I'm not constantly watching the news. I have to really pull back and realize that what's happening out there is horrendous, but it's not my life, and I need to pull back from it sometimes and just relax. So that's my say.
That ties in nicely with what I was thinking, Barbara. My name's Lachelle. I'm a veterinarian and an animal communicator. And one of the things that I've noticed about overwhelm is that it can come from sources that are true, in that I'm actually doing too much and that's actually too overwhelming for me in my real life. Or it can come, as Barbara said, from external sources. So they're not really true in that they're not actually affecting my day to day, but I'm allowing them to affect my day to day. So for me, one of the things that's helpful in dealing with overwhelm is to stop and recognize what exactly is causing the overwhelm. Because a lot of times you get into that mode where you're just kind of like stressed out and in this sort of fight or flight, fearful mode, and you're not even thinking about, wait a second, is there a dinosaur actually about to eat me or not? And if so, what is the dinosaur? And what can is there anything I can actually address here? And if it's the news is making me stressed out, I can turn off the news. If it's I've taken on too much, then my other tip for dealing with overwhelm would be to look at the things that you've taken on and say, do I really need to do this right now? Or is this something that can be done later? Is this something that I can tell someone, no, I can't do this now because it's too overwhelming for me? So to give yourself permission to look at the things that are on your plate and to prioritize them and say no to the things that aren't immediately helpful to you or too overwhelming for you to deal with right now. It's okay to say no to those things. So that's my piece.
And I would like to chime in because Shell, that's where I was going to go as well. I'm Jeff Hyman. I'm a veterinarian and working with pet parents online about for years now and in person. And I find that most of us are overwhelmed at some level, whether it's as a veterinarian, animal professional, a pet parent, an animal advocate. And for me, it's directly related to doing too much. And, for me, addressing overwhelm starts by doing just what Michelle just said, and that is looking at what you've got to do and deciding, if you want to do it and how you're going to address it in your own time. Myself, I've had a lifetime of health issues, and I felt a lot of urgency in my life to get things done really quickly. And that's created a huge amount of overwhelm by doing too much on a timeline that maybe not realistic and not designing my life in a way to address the overwhelm before it becomes overwhelmed. And I realize that's difficult for many of us that graduated from vet school, but there are definitely ways, like Angie said, getting outside or breathing or taking just a couple of conscious breaths throughout the day that really can help address the overwhelm of being in a busy practice or having a busy life. But, I think ideally, for me at least, the more I can just hang out outside and be with my animals and not have a lot to do is my favorite way to deal with overwhelm. Thank you.
Thank you all. My name is Donna Lozito, and I am an animal communicator and a homeopath. And, in listening to what you all had to say, those are all incredible solutions to that sense of overwhelm. But for me in my life, it was necessary to understand the groundwork from which it began. Why am I getting overwhelmed? Why does she have to feel she has to prove herself? And so in resolving old and past traumas, which is really why I'm overwhelmed, because of some old trauma that overwhelmed me, and that just keeps getting repeated and repeated and repeated. And why do I put myself in situations that are overwhelming? And so there's this whole chain of events that really originated from a source that I needed to explore. And for me, because not everyone needs to know the source. As a person, I need to understand, as a person who has experienced a lot of trauma, I need to understand what is creating my imbalance. What is the reason? What is this? Why is this trigger so intense? Because it's usually a trigger, or it's a place I take myself that I've created. And where did that come from? What was I trying to prove to my parents? That I had worth. I'm trying to prove to the world who don't believe about animal communicators and that takes a lot of effort. And that's an old pattern. That isn't a present day. Generally, I find that the present day reality has very little to do with the state of overwhelm. And if you're a veterinarian, which I'm not, I understand that the situation that we're in is overwhelming, and sometimes there isn't much that we can do about it, but in that instance, what I might suggest is to understand how you got into that situation in the first place. Yes, there's the solutions of going outside. For me, those are temporary solutions. I have had to dedicate the last 15 years of my life resolving the very early days of my existence in order to move forward in a peaceful fashion. So there's a lot of threads that really, lead to a really nice peaceful garment. And I think, our intention here is to explore them so that each individual can find their way and map their way to that inner state of peace that we're all looking for.
Beautifully said.
Yeah,
Good. Yes, yes.
so important. And I
I-
think that's the purpose of this group. We call it the Human Animal Spiritual Network, is that in order to find that inner peace that we're all seeking, what you said, Donna, is we need to really, really go back to basics and find out where all this originated and do some really deep healing work on ourselves. Yeah.
And I think that we need to remember that we're bombarded every day with stuff. And so many of us are highly sensitive people. And we have experienced so many traumas along the way. And we have to also remember, wow, a lot of this is coming from our own past, but a lot of this stuff is coming from outside ourselves. And as sensitive people, we need to think, well, wait a minute now. Is this my stuff that's affecting me? Or is this somebody else's stuff that I'm allowing in for whatever reason? you know, there's a lot of turmoil out there. And when we're in that state, yeah, we need to have our own ways of coping out in the world, but also from our deep inner selves, as Donna brought up so well. Because going inward, and for me, it's that spiritual journey. That's where we find our solutions. That's where we find our peace. That's where we find our way forward and our courage to move through this often contentious world. And when we're in a state of overwhelm and anxiety, that's when we need to remember, let's go to whatever works for us. And it's most often deep within. And remember that when we are in those states, it's important not to make decisions. I'd like to throw that out there. When we're not balanced, I know I personally start to think I have to do something outside. I'm going to fix it. No. And that comes from being a person who's been an overdoer her whole life. We need to relax, think about this too shall pass. I often say that to myself, this too shall pass. Let's wait, let's go inward, let's figure out what's happening to ourselves, and then we can go forward and make good decisions. Put to use all the tools we have in our toolkit to help ourselves be strong and happy and healthy, because unless we're that way, we're not much good to anybody else. So I just wanted to offer that out, a special nod to the empaths out there.
Well,
Thanks.
thank you, everyone. This was great. And we hope it's helpful to all of you who are watching and listening. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Well,